I was just looking at the RTE news. Well, not really. My father had it on. And one of the things that I heard, and this is important, and I'm saying this very seriously to anyone who listens, is that the court in Dublin has issued an order restraining anybody from identifying an underage individual who was killed in an incident in the past 7 days in the Greater Dublin area. Now, I have seen remarks on social media which might give cause to suggest that people are in contravention of that particular order. If you have put up remarks on social media that, shall we say, you suspect might contravene the order, get it down. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere. When a person who is younger is killed, irrespective of the circumstances, and I'm not referring to the general thing, to the specific thing here, I'm only speaking generally, it's perfectly normal for people to express their grief, including these days via social media. There's nothing wrong with that. But people need to know that an order has been issued by the court, which is a valid order. Don't listen to any free man on the land stuff. That's a standing order. And that if anybody in any way identifies the underage person who was killed in Dublin in the past 7 days, they could be found in contempt of court. Nothing in this statement I'm making now identifies that person other than what was already said in the news. In other words, a person under the age of 18 was killed in the Greater Dublin area in the past 7 days. I'm not going to elaborate any further. Nobody else should elaborate any further. A court order to that effect is independent of RTE, the Irish Times, the media. You have to respect a court order like that, absolutely. The courts will not take kindly, to put it mildly, to anybody who decides to reinterpret it. So if there are any posts on social media that might be construed as contravening that court order, and that's all I'll say, get it down, and get it down now. Anyway, getting back to the bigger issue here. There was recently an interview with Varadkar, or as Thomas Sheridan calls him, Vadacker. I just love the microaggression. In which, it was on Clareburn Live on RTE. I've spoken about that show before. I was in the studio audience once in early 2018. In which Vadacker was going on about extending the lockdowns and all the rest of it. I saw a Facebook post today by an Aidan Killian in which he describes how he was under the impression that his comedy job could be maintained. I'm not gloating at him, I'm not gloating at anybody, but I do ask people to look back to the posts I made from March of last year, 2020, in which I said to people, this is a long-term thing, cut your losses and get out now. You own a small business, you own a shop, you own a nail bar, you're working in this kind of thing, get out and get out now. 2 seconds. Now, one of the continuing foibles of the left, what we call the left here, and many of them are honest and concerned people, is that they still have faith in politicians. So they imagine that their left-wing politicians will come in and rescue everything. Sorry guys, they won't. Alright? I realised that many, many years ago. I used to be of that opinion. Your politicians would look after us. No, they won't. When it comes to court cases like protecting the Howth Peninsula, you see how fast they run from the notion of putting their name on a summons. Because they don't want the costs. Or the potential or risk of costs. In fact, there's very little risk if you're taking a public interest case, but you try telling that to them. They don't listen anyway. Politicians don't listen. Anyway, what I'm noticing across social media, because social media, you know, they tried to close down Trump for a reason. Social media is extremely valid and extremely relevant. Anyway, what I've noticed is a growing amount of people have witnessed something on Clareburn Live. They witnessed Varadkar salivating at the notion of another lockdown. Now, if we think that a whole load of people are going to wake up and, you know, come over to the dark side here, it's not going to happen. I observed it around the time of Trump's defeat on the 6th of January, that there's a whole load of them out there who are beyond rescue. And that we don't need to consider those ones anymore. That remains my position. But then there's the interim. I had said in a previous video there are 4 groups. The barking psychopaths, the NPCs, the normies and us. We can rescue the normies. We can rescue the normies. I met a woman in the shops tonight And she said, "Oh, are you doing some shopping?" Yes, I said, "I find buying food helps my 91-year-old parents and me to not starve." Oh, she said, "You're not wearing a mask." No. Oh, she said, "Aren't you a rebel?" No, I'm not. I said, "Because I have permission at the shop not to wear a mask." No, I'm not a rebel. I said, "I'm not breaking the law." Can I emphasize that to you? I said, "I'm not breaking the law." "Take your mask off. You won't be breaking the law either." "Oh, no, no, no. I don't want to get into trouble. Also, it's what the regulations say." I said, "Well, then you're choosing to wear it." "All right," I said, "you're choosing to wear that mask. That's your decision and I respect it." I said, "But I'd like you to respect the fact that I'm not breaking the law." That's a normie, though, because she knows what I'm talking about. She doesn't have the courage to take the mask off. That's her problem, but she knows what I'm talking about. She was the woman I spoke to a few days ago. Now, if you look at the Second World War, and you look at the Holocaust, and you look at the persecution, the legal, bureaucratic, institutionalized persecution of the Jews, both within Germany and then when Hitler began to maraud across the Low Countries and into France, their persecution in any of those areas that Hitler got his hands on. That didn't happen overnight. The population of people, they were normies, really, and NPCs, who were groomed into doing that. That happened over a period of at least 10 years. Hitler, when he published Mein Kampf, which is rubbish, I haven't read it, but apparently it's unreadable. It's probably like something from Direct Democracy Ireland, all, or Integrity Ireland, all rambling rubbish. But Hitler made his agenda clear in Mein Kampf. Nobody could accuse him of not putting into place the agenda that he had declared in Mein Kampf. So the warnings were there. So it took a 10-year period of people to be groomed into accepting the Holocaust, because a lot of German people did know that the Holocaust is happening. They did. What I'm going to say next is a bit grisly. In the south of England, when the wind was coming from mainland Europe, they could smell the death camps. They knew what this smell was, or they began in the south and southeast of England to put two and two together about what they were smelling. Because when they cremated the people in Poland and Auschwitz, and the wind blew westward, particularly northwestward, taking it off Poland, across Germany, over the Channel, they knew what they were smelling. Cremating 6 million people, there's going to be a carbon footprint. And if they smelt that in the south and southeast of England, then they smelt that in Germany. So they knew what was going on. And they had by that time they had been reconciled, they'd been groomed into reconciling to themselves what was happening there. Don't let anybody claim ignorance of what was going on. In a way, the people who are accusing us of being cranks and conspiracy theorists are in their own way Holocaust deniers. There's a lot of that, by the way, in the established Irish left. They talk about racism here in this country, but the elephant in the room in Ireland is anti-Semitism that manifests itself in hatred of Israel. Mainstream left-wing politicians in the Dáil refuse to deal with me because I support Israel. Not because I support the persecution of the Arabs in the area formerly known as Palestine. No, not that. And I'm also very much opposed to Israel's 2018 nation-state law, which is being put into action to create second-rate Israeli citizens. You can be an Israeli citizen without being a Jew. A lot of people don't realise that because they don't look into it. Until 2018, Israel was completely even-handed in the treatment of all of its Israeli citizens. And over 33% of Israeli citizens were not and are not Jewish. They're Christian, they're Druze, they're Arab, whatever. All you need to be an Israeli citizen is an Israeli passport. Israel had an exemplary record of even-handed treatment of its non-Jewish population. The 2018 Act is a very retrograde step. A very regressive step by Israel. I condemn it unreservedly, and I condemn it from the position of supporting Israel and their right to exist. Having said that, though, I still support strongly and will always support the right of the Israeli state to exist in its borders and to exist securely. A lot of people in the Irish left, the established Irish left, don't. Now, if we look at the situation that groomed the Holocaust, where it began in earnest. The genocide began in earnest around 1940, once Hitler really began the Second World War. People were groomed into that incrementally in steps. Making Jews wear yellow stars was one part of a process, a trajectory that ended in the Holocaust. Ultimately, it ended in 1945 with the defeat of Hitler and the Reich. This is what we're in now today. So those who are accusing us of being conspiracy theorists to an extent are Holocaust deniers in their own right. The Holocaust happened for a reason and didn't happen overnight. It happened because people were groomed into thinking it was acceptable. There are photographs of the staff of Auschwitz having a day out playing an accordion, having a picnic. They would probably, if you were to ask them, do you think you're a law-abiding, respectable citizen? Yes, they saw what was going on in Auschwitz. At first hand, those people in that photograph saw what was going on at first hand. They were groomed into that, and it took time and it took incremental measures to get them to acquiesce and to accept what they were doing. This is an indictment of human nature. It's nothing to do with race or nationality or culture. It is an indictment of the depravity to which people can be reduced. That is what is happening, and it's why it's so important nationally and internationally and generally for people to refuse to wear a mask on principle. That is one of the reasons why I do it, although I have, as explained elsewhere, in my opinion, got a valid medical reason not to do it, but that's neither here nor there. I'm also doing it on principle. Leo Varadkar is a criminal. He has admitted on 2 occasions to interfering in public selection processes. What shocked a lot of people with the interview by Claire Byrne last week on RTE was once again the sycophancy, once again the refusal to ask awkward questions. This has been going on now for 3 years. This has been going on for 3 years. And RTE at the same time have the cheek to harass people coming through the airport while they themselves break all the laws, including John Williams, the head of news and current affairs. He was photographed at that hoolie for the charge hand who is retiring. These people have brought RTE into disrepute. And I say that in every proper, strict, serious sense. RTE now is a disreputable organisation for its conduct at that retirement party. There's no mitigation of what they did that day. And they, at the same time, were the same newsreaders and news editors like Williams who were telling people, wear a mask, stay home, stay safe. They're mocking us. Well, they're not mocking me because I'm mocking them. But they are mocking the people who bought into it. We are in the situation we are in Ireland today, leaving everywhere else out of it, because from 2009 to date, nobody in the mainstream media has called out what is going on. No governmental decision made by the Irish government since 2009 has in any way helped the greater good of the people of this country. Brian Cowan, Enda Kenny, Leo Varadkar, Micheál Martin, 4 Taoiseach we have now, from 2009 up to now, with Micheál Martin, who's nominally occupying the role until Varadkar decides he gets bored. No decision made by any of the governments of those 4 Taoiseach has helped the people of this country in any way. From the unconditional bailout of criminal bankers, from the refusal to prosecute KBC Bank and not Bank of Ireland, who stole from people with the tracker mortgage scam, from the removal of our right to protect our good name by the 2009 Defamation Act. There are so many things happening that are not getting into the mainstream media. Yet we have John Williams promoting Black Lives Matter and telling us all how racist we are. We are heading for a situation of social and political collapse similar to 1940. I do not want to see a genocide against immigrants in Ireland. I do not support violence, political violence, in any way, form, shape or size. But I cannot stop other people from doing it. And if people get a perception that there's nothing that they can do, then they turn violent. This is inevitable. I'm not inciting anybody to do so, I'm inciting them not to. But I cannot control the behaviour of other people. We have a mainstream media in this country which is grooming people to act with depravity, which is grooming people to support criminal and seditious organisations like Black Lives Matter, and which is grooming people to accept a criminal like Varadkar as somebody who they should view as having moral authority and an example to follow. It is inevitable that this cannot last.